Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, as we had anticipated last week, the interview that Tucker Carlson held in Budapest with Viktor Orbán, the prime minister, has now dropped, and it's full of fascinating detail and a really interesting discussion. You know, you can agree with him and disagree with him. I mean, there are things he said there that we can certainly take issue with, but he's always interesting, whatever he's saying. So I thought that today we could take a look at this interview and discuss what's really taking place. Yeah.
Before we start, one of the things it's so refreshing is that Tucker let Orbán answer. He let him go. Okay, yeah. And these are long answers. These are articulate answers. And I think he practices English a little bit because it was a bit better than last time. Okay, but it was a very good interview, and I really like Tucker's questions. Let's go.
Yes. Okay.
So in the United States, the view is that Ukraine is winning this war. It doesn't sound like that's true.
It's a lie. It's not just a misunderstanding. It's a lie. It's impossible. Everybody who's in politics and understands the logic, the figures, the data, no way.
Why is it impossible?
Because that way, the poor Ukrainians die every day.
Yes,
hundreds and thousands. You know, so my heart is with them. So it's tragedy. It's tragedy for Ukraine. But they will run out earlier from the soldiers, number of soldiers, than the Russians. What finally will count is boots on the ground. And the Russians are far stronger, far more numerous.
There's more
than Ukrainians.
Many more.
So this strategy, what we are just supporting, is a bad engineering of the strategy.
So if the Biden administration has said our goal is to beat Russia, is to effect regime changes to kill Putin and take him out of power.
You know, they misunderstand probably the Russians. You know, to understand the Russians, it's a difficult thing, especially if you have an ocean between you and Russia. So when we speak about politics, I mean Westerners, what is the focus point of our conversation? The focus point is freedom. How to provide more and more freedom to the people.
Yes.
When you speak on politics in Russia, this is not the number one issue. The number one issue, how to keep together the country, because the country is very big. And there's a privilege of the question how to keep together the country and not freedom. Freedom is just another issue, second, third, whatever. First, keep the country together. And that's generate a different kind of culture and understanding of politics. That's creating a kind of military approach, like yes. They have. Always on security, safety, buffer zone, geopolitical approaches. It's not our culture, it's a different approach. It's legitimate to have that because it's their history. But we have to understand that we cannot beat them as we do just now. It's impossible. They will not kill their leader. They will never give it up. They will keep together the country and they will defend it. We finance more, they will invest more. If we send more technical equipment, they will produce more. So don't misunderstand the Russians.
So they're not going to get sick of Putin and throw him out.
Come on, it's a joke.
What would happen if the West succeeded in killing Putin? What would happen to Russia and its nuclear stockpiles?
Okay, so that's okay. May I recall one of my experience?
Yes.
So I was prime minister exactly at the time when the change happened in Russia. Putin after Yeltsin.
Yes.
Yeltsin was very weak and getting weaker and weaker. And I do remember the fear of that time here in Hungary and in Europe as well, whether there will be a new leadership or not. So the real fear here was that there will be an anarchy in Russia.
Yes.
Putin is out and no new guy who is coming in strong enough to keep together the country, the nuclear arsenal and the army control and so on. So everybody was happy when realized that after Yeltsin, Putin come in and started to control the military and the Russian power as a leader. So everybody was happy. I do remember that. So now Putin is in power for long years. we forgot about how dangerous when there is no strong leadership or interregnum in Russia. The interregnum is the worst case possible. So,
but that is our goal. That is the goal of the U.S. State Department.
yeah, but it's a mistake. If this is the goal, it's a mistake.
It sounds very dangerous.
It's more than dangerous, Okay, if to sit in Washington, safe United States, is a different feeling than to sit here in Budapest. Ukraine is next door country, So what's going on there could have an immediate impact in 24 hours here in Hungary and so on. When I was very young, 86, if I remember well, there was an explosion of the nuclear power station in Ukraine by accident.
Yes.
And it infected us immediately. So if there is an escalation in Ukraine,
Chernobyl polluted.
Chernobyl, yeah, that could have an impact on us immediately. So it's this, Washington is far away. Russia and Ukraine is close. That's the Hungarian approach.
So given the manpower imbalance between the Russian and Ukrainian armies and the attrition of the Ukrainian army, hundreds of thousands dead.
And many Hungarians as well. Nobody knows it. But we have a minority, a strong minority, more than 150,000 people in the territory of Ukraine, which was earlier part of Hungary. So it's a historical minority community living there. They are part of the Ukrainian state, and they are conscripted now to the army. And they die. They fight for Ukraine, and Hungarians, soldiers dying for Ukraine as Ukrainian citizens. So we lost, Hungarian nation, we are losing lives daily as also.
At a certain point, they're going to need more men. They're going to need more soldiers. Where are they going to come from?
That's the most risky question. So if any Western country would send any boots on the ground, that would mean a direct war between the West and Russia. And we are in a third world war immediately. So it's a very dangerous moment now.
That's obvious to you.
Absolutely. Not for me. Everybody on the street. All the ordinary citizens are aware that we are living in a very dangerous moment. So the third world war couldn't knocking on our door. So we have to be very, very careful. And that's my message always to America as well at NATO summit. Be careful.
And what kind of response do you get when you say that?
They are bigger, therefore they are more clever. So that's always the case.
So they don't listen to you.
You can say in that way also, yeah.
I have to ask you about Nord Stream. So it seems very obvious that the Biden administration blew up Nord Stream, either directly or through proxies. I've never heard anyone dispute that, really. How is Western Europe, and Germany in particular, the biggest NATO member in Europe, not saying anything about this? It seems, that just crushed the German economy. Why don't they say a word about it?
So when it has happened, we commented it as a terrorist attack.
Yes.
It was rejected in Germany and in the West. It was not a terrorist
I remember that, George.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah, it was very much out of tune with the Western response, but the Hungarians called it for what it was, a terrorist.
Terrorist attack. Yeah, that's right.
So that's a kind of evidence of lack of sovereignty. But it's the job of the Germans. I would not like to criticize them. What we Hungarians
notice he doesn't dispute that the Biden administration blew up Nord Stream. He doesn't do it. He said, "Whoa, come, Tucker. We don't have the conclusive evidence of that yet. We have to wait a little bit. He doesn't even bother arguing about this."
Yeah, well, the sun does rise in the east and sets in the west. Okay, it's this level of logic here.
That's right.
Did immediately. We made clear that there is another pipeline, not just Nordic Stream, but there is a southern stream coming gas from Russia through the southern corridor. Turkey, Bulgaria, Serbia, Hungary. And together with the Serbian Prime Minister, President, we did very clear that if anybody would like to do the same thing with the southern corridor as it was done with the northern one, we consider it as a reason for war or terrorist attack, and we will immediately react. So don't do that. Probably you can do it with the Germans, but you can't do that with this region.
You can do it with Germany, you can't do it.
I think
You were not speaking to the Russians when you said that.
on that subject.
Yes.
It's a Hungarian issue. It's not a Russian issue.
Right, but when you said to the world, don't commit an act of terror against this pipeline, you weren't speaking.
It was not addressed to Moscow.
No, it was not. Right. So if you were in charge of NATO, if you were, say, Joe Biden, what would your next move be in the war in Ukraine? What would you do?
Peace immediately. Call back Trump. That's the only way out.
Call back Trump.
Call back Trump. Because you can criticize him for many reasons. I understand all the discussion, but the best foreign policy of the recent several decades belonged to him. He did not initiate any new war.
Yes.
He treated nicely the North Koreans and Russia, even the Chinese. He delivered a policy which was the best one for Middle East, Abraham Accords.
Yes.
So that was a very good foreign policy. He's criticized that he's not educated enough to understand the word, but this is not the case. Facts counts, and his foreign policy was the best one for the world in the last several decades I have seen. And if he would have been the president at the moment of the Russian invasion started, it would be not possible to do that by the Russians. So Trump is.
Well, I don't know, George. What do you think? What's this whole Trump fanboy thing?
I do find it very, very odd. I mean, because okay, you could argue that the North Korea issue, that was a reasonably successful, but not that successful. But at least he had civil relations. He met the North Korean leader. That no one else had done that. On the other hand, you will say that, well, what did he do in the Middle East? I mean, that the Abraham Accords, it's a kind of an ego thing that the Trump achieved, but didn't really, move the ball on any of the important issues in the Middle East.
It turned to be ephemeral in the end.
Ephemeral, yeah, that's right. So it's kind of very, very strange for him. I mean, obviously they have this a rapport. It's a long-standing rapport going back to 2015, 2016. Kind of a mutual admiration society. But yeah, I'm not very convinced by this.
Well, also, it's really interesting to me is that he's like thrown down the gauntlet. I know you people in the West hate me, and so I don't really care. And then it's just kind of like rubbing it in. And I like Trump, by the way. Okay, yes. It's like you've done everything to me. Tried to rig our election. You're trying to starve us out with through the EU. So what? Okay, so I think it's kind of that.
Yes. I agree with that. It's actually by now we're used to this, but I don't remember ever any power, so out blatantly saying, I want this guy to win the election and I want that guy to lose the election. I mean, it's never been done. I mean, it's like everyone always maintains that kind of the certain diplomatic protocol. Well, we don't, take sides. That's your own internal affair. He just says, no. We want Trump back. So
yeah, but also I think there is the context. So you're not supposed. Yeah, polite people don't do that. But it's very obvious. There's no denying that the U.S. had regime change in Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
regime change. Yeah, absolutely.
The thing is that he's recognized that the West is trying to displace him by all means possible. So he's just like shoving it right back. Okay, I mean, if you're going to do that,
no question. I mean,
why should I hold him?
That's right. That's exactly right. But interestingly, he did have a very quite a close personal relationship while Trump was in power. I mean, Trump would telephone him. He told the story about I was preparing dinner, and then suddenly I got a call, in the kitchen from Trump. There it was, just like that. He's preparing dinner and he starts talking to Trump when he's in the kitchen. So
he's having a ham and cheese toast and with some diet Pepsi, and he's talking with the Orbán.
Well, that's Trump. No, this is dinner for the Hungarians. So I think he probably eats a little bit better than that. So he was probably preparing probably some goulash. But it was an odd, just like that. Trump would just spontaneously telephone him.
Oh, I'm sorry, Trump calling him.
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
Right.
Trump called him while Orbán was preparing dinner in his kitchen.
Well, not many people can say that, George.
No, I don't think so.
Western world, and probably the human beings in the globe as well. That's my personal conviction.
Can I ask you, just to skip around for 1 second, about the Russian invasion of Ukraine? Days before that invasion at the Munich Security Conference, the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, said to Zelensky at a press briefing, "We would like Ukraine to join NATO." You know, Ukraine joining NATO obviously cannot, you know,
It's a long story. When the idea of membership of Ukraine, NATO, was raised, it was in the summit of NATO Bucharest, 2007 or 8. Russia was not strong enough to stop it. So there was a real chance at that time to integrate the Ukrainians into NATO. But it was rejected. There was no agreement among the big Western countries to do so. So it was postponed. But after 2 or 3 years later, the Russians became stronger and stronger and stronger. And now they are even stronger. So we missed the historical opportunity to do so. And this window of opportunity is not open anymore. So
what do you make of that? I mean, he's saying this. To me, it's nonsensical, because even if you pushed for Ukrainian membership in 2008, I mean, why would you think that it would just stick? I mean, you know, the Russians weren't going to put up with it forever. So I don't know. To me, he's just sort of saying, "Oh well, we should have done it then," but you'd have still had the same problem.
Well, it's one of these. An interpretation like that is based on facts that happened after that. So you kind of can build that that timeline if you want, or that way of thinking, but it doesn't hold a whole lot of water. Okay, but I for him, there's kind of a convenient timeline right there, and it's interesting. One of the things that's really interesting is that you have a leader in the European Union that speaks as blunt as he does on these things. George and I would have a problem with his kind of simplistic reasoning right there, but certainly is going against the grain. And you know, and he obviously has a vested interest. So gagglers know George and I have been over this ground like 1,001 times, okay, on how we got here. Orbán's is very simplistic.
Yeah, I agree. And for him to say, well, we missed the opportunity. Well, Merkel didn't think that this was such a great idea even then. So to say, oh, Russia was very weak and couldn't have stopped it. Well, Merkel obviously thought Russia could stop it. So and you know, and therefore, and I think whoever was it, Sarkozy, or I think Sarkozy was
Sarkozy, I think.
Yeah, Sarkozy. Yeah. He obviously thought that this was you're playing with fire here. So just to say that, oh well, that window was there. I mean, to be honest, I mean that it smacks of sort of kind of neocon revisionism. Oh, only we'd done that, you know. But you know, I mean, Russia just wouldn't tolerate indefinitely a situation.
Well,
like
I mean,
Ukraine in NATO.
But absolutely, and in using Orbán's logic or his timeline, I think it's obvious to both of us is that Russia would have been far more proactive in domestic Ukrainian politics to make sure it wouldn't happen. So right. We would have ended up in the same place, okay? Yeah. Because of the same issue, NATO expansion. Right. No matter, you know, if it was 2008, 2010, 2022, 2023, the result would have been the same.
Exactly. And if we go back in time, in 2008, there wasn't any great public support within Ukraine itself for NATO membership. And then 2 years later, they elect Yanukovych, who was on the platform of neutrality for Ukraine. So you know,
and that's why we had the coup. That's why you had the coup.
Okay? Exactly.
And I want to point out, just as we're at this juncture here, you have these figures like Blinken saying, well, in recent public opinion polls, you know, Ukraine's membership in NATO is positive. It's impossible. Well, yeah, because you're not polling the Donbass, you're not polling Crimea. What you've done is you've cooked the polling right. to give something completely different. Consistently from 1991 all the way to 2014. It was a non-starter with the public. Right. No, we don't want to join any military alliance because it would be deemed anti-Russian.
That's right. Which of course it was. Yeah.
Of course it was.
Can't do that. So we can't afford to have that long borderline between Russia and Ukraine, who belongs to NATO. That would mean immediate war danger to all of us, even in Washington. So it's dangerous even for United States. It's not dangerous for the region, but even for you, for the family.
Because it could provoke a nuclear
So it's not a realistic proposal at this moment. So forget about it. We should say just the opposite. We should make a deal with the Russians on the new security architecture to provide security sovereignty for Ukraine, but not membership in it.
So
Orbán has been watching the gaggle.
that idea was shared by many sober people who watched this. So why would the vice president say something like that at a moment when there were Russian troops massed on the Ukrainian border?
You know, it's difficult to follow the mindset of a big power like you are. So it's a different approach to everything than the approach of 10 million people of Hungary with the historical experience, knowing the Russians better than you know. You always think that you know better because of the Cold War, but it's not the case. You should.
They never occupied Washington.
Yeah. You should ask us. How does it work? What is the way of thinking? What is the cultural context?
So back to the piece, if you were in charge, or if Trump were to win in 2024, how would you approach that? What would it look like, the settlement?
First, you should admit, probably publicly acknowledging that the key is in your hand. So if United States would like to have a peace, next morning there is a peace. Because it's obvious that the Ukrainians, the poor Ukrainians on their own, they are not competitive in this war. So if there is no money and there is no equipment from the West and especially from the United States, the war is over.
Yes.
The solution is in your hand. It's in the hand of your president. The president will know the future, but you will solve it. The United States can do it, nobody else. It's not the solution for the Ukrainians. Of course, it's about Ukrainians. They cannot be neglected. They must be involved. But the real factor is not Ukraine. The real factor is intention of the United States.
Yes. So policymakers in the United States have been talking recently about taking Crimea, including the Russian port, away from the Russians. Is that a realistic goal, and what would happen if we tried?
It's totally unrealistic. But no way.
That's not a wise.
No. It's not wise. It's not realistic. It's out of question.
Last night we stood here and you had fireworks over the city to celebrate the founding.
Did you see it, George?
Yes, I saw it. Yeah.
And you had about 10% of your entire population standing outside.
August the 20th was the
They
day.
all seem to be happy to be Hungarian.
St. Stephen's Day.
St. Stephen's, exactly.
How do you get a country that's grateful to be Hungarian and identifies?
You know, it's an ancient nation first. The country was established 1,100 years ago. So we are a historical nation using the same language, no relatives. Nobody speaks the same language around us. Germans and Slavic, no Hungarians. So therefore, to maintain the language, to maintain the culture for this country is a big achievement by itself. So we celebrated even yesterday that we did it for more than 1,000 years, that we are still Hungarians. And to be Hungarians we are very proud of it. We love the nation, we love the country, and we are proud of it. It's not very much mainstream thinking, political thinking of today Western societies, but in Hungary we are still very patriotic and Christian and committed to that values, not in an ideological level, but on the streets every day.
Do you think that's why you're so unpopular among the leadership in the United States and the West?
Yeah.
I'm not the favorite politicians of the liberals, unfortunately, but nobody's perfect, you know.
But why do you think that is? The country seems to be thriving. That's usually the measure we use.
No, it's more about our civilization. I mean, the Western Christian civilization. Now, the main division line is not according to ideologies. It's deeper. It has an anthropological character. So on one side, in Europe and probably in your country, but in Europe definitely, there are groups of people who think that the most important thing of the world is their ego, themselves, me. This is the center of the world. The other camp of the people, the other part of the society thinks that it's not true, because there are certain things which are more important than me, than my ego: family, nation, God. And because they are more important than me, I have to serve this higher level thing. So this society has a majority here in Hungary. And the other society, which is concentrating only me, only dealing with myself, it's more westernized, dominating factor of the political life. And the governments of the West, more belonging to the first group of the people. I belong to the second one, and Hungary belongs to the second one. Our constitution is concentrating on the we, how we are linked together: family, nation, God, what is common, So we, the Hungarian nation, that's how we speak on that. It's totally out of fashion now in the Western European societies.
But why would that be so provocative to certain people in the West? I mean, different countries have different traditions. Mongolia has its own religions, language, but that's not offensive. But something about what you said is very offensive.
Because in the Western societies, politics very often led by intellectuals. And the intellectuals like to be ideologists. A special approach from the ideology.
I think he's a big fan of Paul Johnson.
Paul Johnson, yes.
For everybody, the reference is intellectual. The intellectuals. I'm not sure if there's a.
That was his book. That was Paul Johnson's book. Yeah, intellectual.
Yeah, I actually loved it. Okay, it's a really good book.
Difficult thing, because it has an exclusivity. So when the liberal says that this is the interpretation of society, it means that this is the only way to interpret the society. If you do differently, you cannot be a good man. So we have another interpretation. We have a Christian and national, more traditional interpretation of human being and society. But they can't accept it because it's different. So we are plural, they are hegemonistic. That's the problem.
So the intolerance is baked in. It's part of.
It's coming from the
ideology.
Absolutely, the liberal ideology, basically. Liberal originally meant freedom, but now in Europe, liberal means that you are enemy of the freedom because you are hegemonistic request on society, on values and the concept of human being as well. So liberals are against freedom. That's how we see them.
I've noticed. I mean, I don't live in Hungary. I can't assess it. I can assess your media landscape, which is much freer than ours, much freer, much more diversity.
I have to fight every day.
In the United States, right? The people who run our country don't. Virtually every media outlet is on their side, reflexively. And yet they describe you in the United States in the media as a fascist. And the Biden administration seems to believe it, the State Department anyway. The U.S. is the biggest, most powerful country in the world. Are you worried about being crushed by the United States?
It's dangerous, may I say. So we should not neglect the importance of that fact. When the United States administration does not like you or consider you as an enemy or having a backtrack, it's dangerous in international politics. So you are powerful, still number one power of the world. So if you criticize somebody, we have to be very cautious how to deal with that. And now the Democratic administration does it regularly. So we have to be clear here that this is not the voice of America. It's the voice of the administration of the United States. Not all Americans has the same approach as the government. Like the Republicans, who are far closer on value basis to us. The previous president is friend of Hungary on the value basis, historically and wholeheartedly. So it's a real friend. So don't make a mistake to consider United States equal to the United States administration.
Yes.
And I think that difference is important because you have competition, a political system based on competition, and hopefully Trump will come back or Republicans will come back, and the relationship will be again very good. But now it's absurd. Can you imagine that United States government deleted the agreement between Hungary and the United States on double taxation, but they still have the agreement between Russia and United States.
And that means that American citizens, for those who don't know what this is, American citizens who live and work in Hungary have to pay Hungarian taxes to your government, but also full federal taxes to the United States.
But the attitude as such, we are a member of NATO, we are ally to the United States, and we are worse treated than the Russians, you know. What's that about?
What is it about? It's what you just said. So what it just
But it's kind of interesting though. I mean, he says, well, the Republicans, I wouldn't put any money on, I mean, Trump, that's a different issue, but you know, you think Mike Pence is going to be any better disposed towards you than Biden or Nikki Haley? Yeah, Nikki, exactly. Chris Christie, or one of those others, or even the ones who are not running, like Marco Rubio. They're not going to like you. They're going to dislike you as intensely as Biden does.
Well, he shouldn't have really gone down there, because that's too simplistic, as George has just explained. But instead of saying a party, he should have said conservatives, and then it'd be a lot closer. Real conservatives that you and I would recognize, not the fake ones.
Exactly, that's right. No, I agree, because you should have said conservatives, and that would have been more sensible, because you know, he has these CPAC conferences that are now taking place in Budapest. And so, yeah, look, we have these friends among American conservatives. We had these CPAC conferences here. Yeah, these are our friends. But the Republicans, you know, some of those are just rabid on the subject of Russia and everything else. So, anyway.
It might be helpful to say it out loud. Now, the Biden administration spent U.S. tax dollars to campaign against you in your last election. They didn't succeed. You won in a fair election.
Big money.
Big money.
Big money.
I don't think most Americans understand that their tax dollars went to defeat you in Hungary.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's not, I mean, if you respect democracy, don't you let countries govern themselves?
Definitely against all the principles we confess.
Yes, it is. Are you worried about American control over Hungarian debt? Debt. Yeah, debt. I mean, are you worried that the Biden administration could potentially hurt Hungary economically?
No. 10 years ago.
Personally, I don't really understand Tucker's question with debt. Do you?
I didn't understand it either, to be honest. Because I wasn't aware of Hungary being in any kind of debt to the United States, so I just didn't quite get that. He seemed baffled about it as well.
Well, I think that a better question would be just using financial tools to hurt your economy.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Or any kind of trade restrictions or whatever. That's right.
Okay, but today we are strong enough. No. It's not easy. It's far easier to cooperate with the United States government. It's far nicer horizon to have a good relation. But even without that, we can stand and we can survive and we can grow. Even we can grow, not just finance, but we can grow.
So in the American media, you have been dismissed as a puppet of Russia, a friend of Putin's. I want to put on the screen a picture of you being arrested by Soviet-backed police as a young man. This country was occupied by the Soviets, by the Russians for 40 years. So given that, are you a bootlicker of Putin? Are you a puppet of Putin? What's your view?
When I first time met him, come back as prime minister, we said very clearly, don't touch upon history, because the history between Russia and Hungary is rather sad. One of the main heroic attempts of the Hungarian nation to get freedom was launched against the Habsburgs in the middle of the 19th century.
1848.
The army of the Tsar of Russia. They helped the Austrians because we were in the winning position.
Yes.
And the Russians were invited by the Habsburg, and they crushed the freedom fight here in Hungary. That's first. Then they occupied us in the Second World War, and then when we.
But it's interesting because it brings that up again. That's fine. But your beef is with the Habsburgs. I mean, Habsburgs. They're the ones who called in the Russians. I mean, the Russians wouldn't have done it. I mean, the Habsburgs called them in. So okay, well, if now that you ask. They had they had a treaty. This was the the Holy Alliance. So this was how the Holy Alliance was supposed to work: crush all revolutionary movements.
And then you have the Western powers turn against. After Russia did a favor for the Habsburgs, then we have the Crimean War. Thanks for the we shed blood for you. Thanks. Now you're going to go to
exactly.
war. George lives in Hungary. I lived there for a while. I get these histories, and that's they every culture, every nation state creates its hierarchy of ideas and all that. And so I wouldn't be turning around and say, well, what about that? You don't do that. Okay,
right.
That's fine with me. Okay,
right. But that's the thing. I mean, we're talking about events that took place 175 years ago. And that's fine. I mean, if you want to say, well, I'm Irish, and so I hate the English. Okay, that's fine. It's a nice thing to say at a party, Well, but it's not a serious, political point. I mean, it's like, well, because I'm Irish, I have to hate the English. So I bring something up from 175 years ago. But it's unfortunate that, I mean, I don't think he takes this very seriously. But there are Hungarians who do take this seriously. Oh, 1848. I mean. You can't treat events like that 175 years ago as if they happened yesterday.
But I think the point, and he's going to flesh it out. I think there's a little bit more to this here.
Yes.
The point is, everybody, Orbán is right. Okay, it is a sad, tragic, difficult relationship. Okay, but Orbán's point is that is the past. Okay, that's what he's trying to say. And we have the world is different. We have different interests. We have different problems. And instead of just having this kind of ideological blinder, democracy, autocracy, and all, Hungary is in the neighborhood. Okay, it needs stuff. Okay,
that's right, exactly.
To get rid of their yoke. In 56, they crushed us again. So history is.
But this again is where I think he makes a serious mistake, because again he does something that he of all people should know better. That's not Russia. I mean, if you have that, you could argue Imperial Russia in 1848, maybe continuation, and that's continued by Russia today. But that was the Soviet Union. And that was communism. That was the party and everything else. It was a very different from Russia coming in and crushing the Hungarians.
Ukrainian.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. So, but the Hungarians do this all the time. So,
yeah.
If you ask anybody on the street that any Hungarian leader who is elected freely can be a puppet of Putin or the Russians, they say it's a joke. It's impossible, because we are a sovereign country, and even to the Russians, we deliver many times that we are sovereign. So I don't take seriously that kind of accusation. But of course, I try to have a rational relationship with the Russians, especially on economy and energy. And my personal point is that without involving the Russians into the security architecture of Europe, we cannot provide a safe life to the citizens of Europe. But I think it's going against it, unfortunately.
Well, Russia is hardly integrated into the security architecture of Europe. All of NATO is against. I mean, NATO is at war with Russia.
What NATO does is rather strange, because if you look at the official position of NATO as an institution, as an alliance, they're exactly saying what we said. So no involvement, and we should do as much as we can for peace. That's the official position of NATO. But
Article 1.
NATO says that member states of NATO should do their best to support the Ukrainians. So that's we should clarify that what's going on, like the United States foreign policy to support and finance the Ukrainians, it's not the policy of NATO, it's the policy of the United States. That's a big difference.
Or at least it should be. I mean, it should be. So I mean that none of it, Article 1, Article 5, none of it applies to Ukraine, because this is NATO has just embraced U.S. foreign policy without any question, without any criticism or anything, which just shows what a joke NATO is. That it is not. It is just simply a fig leaf for the United States.
But I mean, NATO countries now border at over 1,500 miles of Russia. So it seems like the point, if you take a step back, the point of NATO is to provoke war with Russia. I mean, that's what it seems like. What is the point of NATO?
The point of NATO is that we are stronger than the Russians are. That's very important to make clear. Okay, there is the nuclear armament,
yes,
which must be balanced, but on conventional weapon context, We, NATO, are far stronger than the Russians are.
Well, George, can you stop that?
Yes.
I mean, empirically speaking, I have no idea what he's talking about.
I have no idea either. And again, if you're going to go down that path, well, we NATO are much stronger than Russia, then all you're doing is you're fueling that very insecurity that he actually talked about. He said that, well, it's not a great idea to provoke Russia. And Tucker said it exactly. Tucker's question was absolutely spot on. The role of NATO is to provoke Russia. It doesn't seem to have any other purpose but to provoke Russia. And it's kind of what it's done now. I mean, it's actually fulfilling its tasks in provoking Russia in Ukraine.
Be careful what you wish for, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Look, Orbán is a political figure within the European Union. Hungary is a member of NATO. So I think he's kind of treading,
Yep.
he'll tread close to the line, but not over it. That's how
I agree with that. I think, he's still, he belongs to the club. So he can't go too far astray. But, he has to be able to see himself that this, your membership in NATO, I mean, this whole idea that, well, we're stronger than Russia, but, Russia poses no threat. Why would it? Why would Russia pose a threat? It hadn't done it in the past. I mean, if you just talk about these analogies, okay, Austria came and helped ask the Russians to step in. Russia didn't want to do it. They said, okay, well, we'll do you a favor. That was, but it wasn't because, well, Russia was expanding and wanted to take over territory. It never did that. You have the communist era, but that was after World War II. That was a consequence of World War II and the Cold War. So there's nothing like, well, we have to worry about Russian expansionism. Now he's sort of essentially talking the nonsense that the Poles talk and the Baltic
well,
states.
and everybody, when you think about 56, what happened before 56? Hungary was a Nazi ally. Okay,
Exactly.
They were allied with the Nazis. They fought with, and arguments have been made. I'm open to all kinds of interpretations, but with the capture of Stalingrad, it was the Hungarian troops and the Romanian troops that were the weak link when the Sixth Army was encircled. Right. Maybe war lore, I don't know, but you hear it repeated many, many times. So again, Orbán is leaving out really important pieces. And in 1848, George, the Russians came, but they left.
They left. That's it. They left. They did the job and then they left. And that's the thing. Now, the business about what you just said about World War II, the Hungarians always forget that. It's whenever they talk, oh, we were sold out, but to Stalin, we were betrayed, and blah blah, and this is so outrageous, the Soviet invasion of Hungary. Never that the preceding set of events. I mean, maybe you weren't a fulsome ally of Hitler's. Maybe you didn't like Hitler, but you were an ally. And you took what Hitler
fought against Soviet forces inside the Soviet Union.
The Soviet Union, we did it because Hitler revised Trianon. It doesn't matter what the reason was. Yeah, he did it because Hitler revised Trianon, but you still had invaded the Soviet Union. I mean, it's but again, always absent in any Hungarian discussion.
600,000 Red Army troops died liberating
Hungary
from a fascist regime.
Right, exactly.
Yes. So therefore, if somebody is belonging to NATO, member of NATO, it's obvious that we are in a secure position. Russia is not able to threat our security. It's out of question because we are so strong. That's the number one point. The second is that some leaders of NATO, some member state leaders like your president, they had a strategy to crush the Russians somehow. And the strategy was that the Ukrainian soldiers will fight, and some member states of NATO will finance this fight by money and by military technical equipments. And this is the way how militarily we can beat the Russians. We Hungarians said very clear at the very first point, this strategy will never work. So this is a bad strategy. And now we have 1.5 years of the war, and it's obvious that this is a bad strategy. We have to stop it. We need a new strategy, or we should run as soon as we can for peace.
Let's ask you one last question about Trump, since you brought him up a couple of times. You were just in an election that I know your staff was worried you might lose. There was an open question. You won pretty decisively, but it was a real election. Did you consider at any point just indicting your challenger on fake documents charges?
That's a great question. I love this.
That been easy?
You mean against me?
Yeah.
Okay, we have some bad chapters of our history, but that kind of civilian war, cold civilian war, was not part of our culture. So we can beat each other, we can argue against each other, but you know, to do what's going on now in some countries and even in your country, you know, to use the justice system against the political opponents. In Hungary, I think it's impossible to imagine. You know, that was done by the communists. It's a very communist methodology to do that. So in Hungary, we are all aware that we are, okay, we disagree on many things, ideology, values, vision on the future, even practices of politics. But you know, we belong to the same nation. Okay, we are rivaling, but what is the final sense of this argument and competition? To unite the nation, yeah, to provide a better future. You can't say that I will kill you or I will send you to the prison, and you know, if you follow that track, no chance to unify the nation. If the nation is not unified, you can't run for big purposes. So competition is okay, but it must be fair, legally perfect. Otherwise, you can sacrifice your country and the future of your country for your personal success, which is not acceptable, at least not in Hungary.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much.
So that's the interview. Any parting thoughts, Peter?
Well, if you want a more articulate, and it's probably because it's translated from Hungarian into English by professionals, the Hungarian foreign minister comes out with some really, really good stuff, okay, which articulates Hungary's position more. Orbán, he's a Hungarian nationalist, very patriotic, as he has said here. And, you know, he has kind of what I would say kind of an idealized, even though I don't think he would like me using that word, idealized view of his country's history. But at the same, there are far more positives. I mean, pushing back against the neoliberal establishment and their worldview and their actions takes enormous amount of courage from a man coming from a country so small. Okay, I admire it so much. Though, as George and I commented intermittently, there's a lot of flags went up with me. But overall, I like it.
That's right. I think that's the problem with Orbán. You said, yes, he's a Hungarian nationalist, a Hungarian patriot, but unfortunately, he still has a kind of a mindset in the past. It's like he was shaped by the 1970s. He hates the communists, and somehow he still equates the communists with the Russians with the Soviet Union, and he can't. And unfortunately, there's a lot of Hungarians do that, and then
all of Eastern Europe does that.
Exactly, and they're not really able to somehow move into a different world. You don't have to like the Russians, but you have to then accept that this is it's a different world, the different issues. This is a different Russia. And Russia's issue with the West has nothing to do with the Cold War, communism versus capitalism or anything like that. But they're not able to think these concepts out, and it's unfortunate. Again, we're the same age as Orbán, maybe even older, and we are able to think that you can't just apply the dogmas of the 1950s to a later time, and he doesn't until he kind of falls back into it at times. So that I think detracts from his message.
Yeah, it was interesting. On my program, we had a German guest, and then we had an American living in Prague, and it was certainly another guest, and we were talking about Russophobia and all of that. And the American guy in Prague was saying, the Czechs are really, really super anti-Russian, and so we have the 4 boxes. I said, they don't hate Germans anymore, do they? Okay, so I mean, what I'm saying is that these are a lot of history, renditions of history can be very convenient based on the moment, okay? And I think that's what's happened here. And there's always somebody, you have to blame someone. See, small countries in Eastern Europe always blame somebody else. Have you noticed that, George?
Yeah,
it's always somebody else's fault, okay?
That's right.
And that's why, you know, talking to a lot of Eastern Europeans, particularly, you know, if they're like half our age, okay, you come across these very simplistic historical renditions that are very politically convenient. You know, I can remember, you know, when they had the last major expansion into, you know, the EU. I mean, like EU is like an altar. They just worshipped it. And I just kept saying, "Don't go so fast. Slow down. Slow down." And then you have this kind of remorse where how often do people like women? Yeah, I was wrong. I screwed it up. I was overriding. People don't like to do that. Okay?
No, I think that's right. And that's really the case with Orbán. I'm always like, oh, we're a member of NATO, we're a member of the EU. We're fully booked up with all our friends. They said, well, what are you getting out of the EU? I mean, it's like, well, what are you getting out of NATO? You've just said NATO has led you to disaster. He said, we're on the brink of World War III. So what exactly is NATO done for you? Well, we're stronger than Russia. And how's that going to help you if there's World War III? I mean, that's what NATO's on. Well, we're stronger than Russia. Great. What's the plan then? I mean, so that's really the problem. And what are you getting out of Ursula von der Leyen? But he obviously isn't going to go there. I mean, he's prime minister. He hasn't been asked to revise completely Hungarian policy since 1989. I mean, he's never run on that platform. But you'd have to start thinking through and thinking about the future. NATO and the EU are not doing you any favors.
George, what people in countries that are in NATO have benefited from this alliance?
I don't see it.
With the exception of some very small, tiny elites.
Right.
No, I don't see any upside. Right. Okay. I mean, you have the most fervent, pro-Ukrainians in Poland, and they're biting at the bit now about grain prices. Okay. I mean, be careful what you wish for. Okay.
That's right.
I mean, Eastern Europe traditionally is agrarian. Okay. And Hungary's an agrarian country. A lot of people don't know Austria is actually quite agrarian as well. Poland, what does Poland mean? You know what the word means? It means field. For God's sake, it means field. Yeah. That's what it is. It's a big field.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Again, that's a very good example. They were all asked, we're going to do this for Ukraine. Let's do this for Ukraine. And suddenly the farmers, suddenly, you're not going to do it. You're not going to drive us out of business. So the Poles, who have an election coming up in October, said very quick, no grain imports into Poland. So this is your policy, and it's clearly led to disaster. And the Poles, they're so driven by hatred for Russia, they just they'll support any policy that's hatred for Russia. But for the Hungarians who like Orbán, who think rationally, what are you getting out of this? I mean, just since you don't have this kind of rabid hatred for Russia, whatever the grievances you come up with, why? What do you need this for? We're on the brink of World War III. Very, very dangerous. You have Americans. Your Americans. Your great American ally. We're the American ally. They're trying to overthrow you. They're doing to you what you're accusing Moscow of having done in the communist era. So what are you getting out of all of this?
You said something, like the Poles will, do anything that is against Russia. Which really, there's an extra layer. Actually, it's turned into an interesting binary. Is that you have this historical grievances, which George and I do not deny. Okay, I'm not sure how useful they are in the present, but anyway,
no, exactly. And I said the analogy. Exactly the analogy. Yeah, okay.
But the flip side is currying favor with Washington.
Right,
See, that is the added layer here. Okay, to get the Poles to be anti-Russian, you don't have to do anything. Okay,
Right.
I mean, just get them riled up. But you have these elites, and Politico and these other things. They really loved it. They really like to soak that up. Is how important. Because the Poles will worship anyone in the White House, anyone. Okay,
right. But that's the thing when you say currying favor with Washington, with a view to what? To be used as cannon
for their elite interests.
Exactly.
That's all it is.
But do you want to get into a war with Russia? You want a war with Russia? Because the Americans will say, well, we'll fight to the last Ukrainian, but we're happy to fight to the last Pole as well. The last
I mean, it was 2 years ago with the debacle and coming out of Kabul, and you still want to get on the American train, really? I mean, there's so much of it that defies logic, and some of it is just so petty hatred, okay? Which is, it's impossible to discuss things when people have these kind of pathological hatreds. You give up right away. Just say, yeah, you're right. Okay, fine.
No, I think so. So, but again, Orbán clearly is thinking outside the box, but sometimes he has a foot in the box, and so he relapses to the old box style thinking. But there's no one else. I mean, I regularly ask, well, are there other people in Europe? Are things going to change in Europe? I say, no, I mean, all I can see is Orbán. There doesn't seem to be anyone else who is close to power. There may be various sensible politicians, in various countries, but they're not close to power as of yet. So we're still continually looking to Orbán to bring some rationality to this.
There's no other person in the EU that Tucker wants to interview.
No, I can't think of it.
Oh, we do know another person that Tucker wants to interview, and that's Vladimir Putin.
That's right.
I'm absolutely I have no intel, zero intel, everyone, but I'm absolutely sure it's going to happen. I'm absolutely sure of it. Okay.
Why are you sure?
Because Tucker wants to do it.
But do you think Putin does?
I think so. Yeah. Look, I've been at many press conferences with Putin over the years, and one thing that I think is I can say with complete conviction is that he loves questions from foreign journalists. He loves them. Okay, because that's when he's at his best. He on top of his game. It's his best game. Okay, and he likes to spar, and he's good at it. Okay, and with maybe Orbán can also talk for hours on end. You can tell us, but I mean, if you want to go one-to-one and have a debate or an interview, he's a good person to interview. And Tucker does a really good job. Okay,
I agree.
One with Trump. I mean, he was pushing Trump. I was really surprised. Trump didn't take the bait for the first time ever. Okay. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that Orbán has a lot of courage. I admire him a lot, and as you can see, George and I can quibble with a lot of things he has to say. Right. But in toto, it's an interesting person to listen to.
No, absolutely. It's a good interview, and I think he has an interview with Alexander Vučić of Serbia.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
that should be.
Yeah, but he's not in the EU.
He's not in the EU, exactly. But that should be coming up. Though I don't think Vučić is anything like Orbán in his kind of intellectualism, his thinking outside the box. I mean, I'm sure Vučić will complain about NATO and so on, but he's not really a serious thinker.
He's a complainer. You can say he's a complainer, but he's more like a moaner. Okay?
Yeah,
he moans.
Okay. Exactly.
Okay. If you don't like the job, quit. Okay?
Exactly. That's right. Absolutely.
All right, everybody. This is The Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com, visit our store, and tomorrow George has a second live stream of the week.
Second live stream of the week, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join me. Come with comments, criticisms, suggestions, and on the way out of the door to get a cold one, think about little Buddy. And Buddy says, "Yeah, I'm thinking outside the box, and I'm thinking in terms of the tip jar, which we have to take out of the box. Maybe it'll get a little bit fuller. So since Buddy's now really abandoning this inside the box thinking, we should all go down that path. So if you have a few bob in your pocket, whip them out, dunk him in his tip jar. That'll, you know, soothe him a little bit. We're very grateful for all of your help and friendship and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve the technology, and above all, you know, we'll, you know, lift Buddy out of his despondency. He looks very, very depressed there.
He was taking a nap. He was taking a nap.
So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.